Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app. Hub24 is on a mission to empower advisors to deliver better financial futures for their clients. They are dedicated to customer service excellence and delivering innovative product solutions that create value for advisors and their clients. These are just some of the reasons why advisors rate them number one for overall satisfaction and why their managed portfolio solution has been rated best in market 5 years running. Hub24 believes nothing happens in isolation. So they're working together with advisors, licensees, and industry leaders to leverage their data and technology expertise to help solve key challenges in the delivery of financial advice, so more Australians can access cost-effective advice. Welcome back to the XY Advisor Podcast. I'm Fraser Jack, and today I am joined by Whitley Bejar. Welcome.
Thank you. Hey.
How did I go with the pronunciation?
Good, yeah, good.
I managed it all right?
Yep.
I'm pretty good at mucking that up, so I'm pretty happy with myself. Tell me about you. Tell us about what you're doing at the moment.
Cool. So I'm what we call a practical academic. Yes, we do actually exist. So that means that I'm a practicing advisor and mortgage broker as well as an academic at Griffith University. So I've been doing that for about 5 years, now balancing both of the roles, but I've been an advisor for the last 9 years. Wow,
that's incredible. So the practicing academic, yes, they exist, because we do like to put dish a little bit onto academics, don't we? To say, well, you how would you know what happens in the real world?
Yeah.
So you're the one. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty.
Actually, there's actually only a few of us in Australia. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy about it. So.
Yep, nice. Tell us about your journey. Let's go back in time. How did you decide that you wanted to get into financial advice and the financial services area?
Yeah. I guess I never wanted to be honest. I just sort of fell into it. I feel like a lot of people do fall into it. Well, at least they did back when I first started, because we didn't have the opportunity to go to university and study financial advice. So for me, I actually grew up watching my dad be an advisor. So he's been an advisor for the last 40 years. He's always worked from home. I had absolutely no idea what he did for a living. And for some reason, I thought he was an accountant. And I think in my last year of my undergraduate university degree in Tasmania, I was on the hunt for a new job. And he had just purchased at another company. So he was looking for an admin person. And I said, okay, no worries, I'll do that in my last year. That'll bide me over while I finish my degree. And then I realized pretty quickly after working in that admin role that I really liked financial advice and I really wanted to pursue that as a career. So I went out and did my RG 146.
Nice and easy.
And it was nice and easy. And basically within 12 months, got my accreditation or my AR, and I've just been loving it ever since.
Isn't it funny how a lot of people don't know what you do?
Yeah.
Even in your own family. And like you said, your dad was an advisor for many years, and you're like, I don't actually know what he does. I think when I was an advisor, my kids didn't know what I did. Yeah. And now that I do podcasting, nobody knows in my family what I do. So it's even better. So moving into that as an admin role, tell us about that. Like that starting, were you, I'm assuming it was paper files back then.
It was paper files, yes. So we had, oh goodness, I don't know if people are still using Coin, but our practice used Coin, and the two of the firms that we had purchased were using very, very old school paper files. My dad actually was pretty progressive at that point because he had most things on Coin electronically, which I thought was great.
Yep.
So I guess my job at the beginning was basically to move all of those hard copy files into digital files, which was great. Yep. I'm being sarcastic, but it was a good learning curve. It was a good learning curve, and it sort of told me, like, this is what not to do. Like, this is because all the files that we use at the moment for our practice now are digital, which is great. And I work remotely. So my practice is actually based in Tasmania, and I'm obviously in the Gold Coast. So I've been remote for the last 5 years, and it's just been so easy to have everything electronic, which has been such a joy.
Incredible. So you started through that. Tell me about the moment then you became an advisor or an AR.
Yeah. I still didn't really know if that's what I wanted to do at that point, to be honest, because, again, I was so new to it. And, doing the diploma, I think at that point as well, was quite difficult for me because I'd never done anything like that before. And I just remember thinking, gosh, there's so much paperwork involved. Do I actually want to be doing this for a career? But it was when I started sitting in with clients and actually helping people meet their goals and seeing real change, that's when I realized that that's actually what I want to do. It's not so much the paperwork. The paperwork is just part and parcel of the job, but it's the actual helping people that gets me excited. And that's sort of why I really did pursue this as a career.
Yep. And you started by sitting in on meetings with your dad?
Yeah.
And what did that teach you?
There was a lot involved. Because it wasn't just him. There were two other advisors in the firm. Well, there are two other advisors in the firm, and I was sort of shadowing all of them to see what they did and what they did differently as well, which I thought was quite interesting. And then I sort of picked up my own style of taking interviews and the way in which I deal with clients, which, if I'm being honest, it's actually a more casual approach. I feel like a lot of the practices up here in particular are very different to the way that our practice runs in Tasmania. But, we are in a small regional town, so we do have a more casual approach to dealing with things. Obviously, it's still professional advice, but the way in which we deal with client meetings is probably a little bit more on the casual side. And at that point, I was still doing visits to people's homes as well, which I don't do so much anymore because I can use Zoom or Teams to...
Home visits these days are online. Tell us about your progression through that practice.
Yeah. So, as again, started off in sort of admin CSO type role. And I was doing that for about 2 years. 2 years while I was doing my study and everything like that. And then when I got my AR, and after I'd done the shadowing process, so that probably was about 6 to 12 months of training. So that was before the professional year, I guess. But we still did it, but it just wasn't registered like that. And then I was sort of out on my own. And part of that at the time was we had a commission structure. I was obviously on salary, but we got a commission bonus as well with that. So I was on the hunt for new leads, generating new business, and I've always been a bit of a go-getter, if I can say that. Before getting into advice, I was doing event management and commercial real estate, of all things. Putting
on music festivals, aren't
you? Yeah. So, that allows me to go out and meet new people, and, I'm pretty confident with getting out there. So finding new business wasn't really something that was that difficult to me, because I like to say that I am a bit of a people person.
Yeah. So how old were you then?
21.
So you're 21, you're an advisor, you're out there hunting down new business, plenty of confidence in what you're able to bring to the table. How were you finding people to talk to?
I actually talked to my students about this all the time, because when you are so young, especially as a young female, it's really hard to get people that are older than you to take you seriously, especially, I guess, people that have accumulated a lot of wealth. And they're used to perhaps dealing with, the previous advisor, for example, who was, in his late 50s. So to go from that to a 20-something-year-old female was quite difficult to break that barrier. And
can I ask you, is that barrier more so in your head than the client's head, or is it 50-50? Or
it's 50-50. Yeah, because in my mind, I was thinking, how can I give advice to you when I don't have all of my finances sorted as well? Like, I don't even have a house at this point.
So but this is your limiting belief, right?
That's my limiting belief.
You know more about that product and that strategy than those clients.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But then you get the other side where I was getting a lot of condescension. So I was getting lots of, "Oh, thank you, sweetheart," or I just think, come on, we're beyond that. But anyway, I just took it on the chin and just kept going with that. But yeah, you're right. But this is what I say to my students all the time: is like, when you first leave university and you get into the financial advice sector or the finance sector, you are really overwhelmed, because at that point you may not have, built up the portfolio that you want to have, and you second guess your advice. The advice is great, right? And at that point, my advice was really good. And if I didn't know the answer, I'd go back to somebody else in the team who had 20 or 30 years experience, and I could get the answer from them. But in my mind, I had to get over that barrier myself, right?
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And how did you, I mean, apart from, getting years of experience, how did you sort of get through that?
Oh, the experience did help, to be honest, but also it was me taking my own advice and actually implementing, practicing what I was preaching, basically, is what I'm trying to say, is actually building up some wealth of my own and being like, yeah, you know what I'm giving out to people and what I'm saying to people actually works, And I'm part and parcel for that. I look back at where I was 10 years ago and as to where I am now, and I just think, holy moly, 20-something-year-old Whitley never would have thought she'd be in this position. And it's all to do with diligence and, yeah, being committed to being true to myself and true to the advice.
Yep. So. And the condescending thing, did you have any tips for people going through that?
Oh, goodness. Pick your battles. And again, I had this a lot when I was working in event management. I remember one of the site managers for one of the companies that I was working with a while ago would always call me sweetheart, and it would always give me a bit of a pat on the bum, right? And I just remember saying to him one day, I was like, this is so inappropriate. And if I said, if I was a man, you wouldn't be doing this. So why is it appropriate for me? Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. It's a whole nother rant for another time. But for me, pick your battles, because sometimes people will make off-the-cuff comments because it's a generational thing and perhaps they don't realise that it's offensive now in 2021. Other people might just be a little bit misogynistic, and those people exist, and that's okay. But you don't have to take offence.
Yeah, the generational thing, I mean, I'm in no position to comment, but the generational thing to me feels like it's almost, they may think it's a term of endearment.
Yeah.
But it's just a little reminder that that's no longer endearing.
Well, that's it. And like, I've even had, my husband's grandfather, he'll call me sweetheart and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. He doesn't mean anything by it. It's just, it's a term of endearment, but if I wasn't the person who I am, I probably would get offended by that kind of stuff, but I definitely don't.
Yeah, certainly not in a professional context, that's for sure. Very good. We thought we can move on from that. Yeah. So are you still in that family business now?
Yes.
Is that the same business?
Yeah, same business.
And how does that work from a succession point of view? Are you the succession of the business? Have you always been seen that way? Are you having to deal with that?
Yeah, I was going to be the succession plan. But now I've I'm pursuing the career in academia as well. So the next sort of five or so years, it's me focusing on my research and getting that completed, because as it stands, I'll be enrolling in the PhD next year after I finish my research project, and that'll be the next sort of three years of my life, right? Doing research. So for me, getting into, I guess, a leadership role in the business is not something that I'm looking at the moment. Yeah. Doesn't mean that I won't consider it later on, but for the moment, it's not a priority for me.
Fantastic. So if we go back to that journey, or your journey through, when did you start with down the education pathway?
That again, I fell into it. So it was something that I wanted to do when I was older, right? So when I had accumulated 40 years of knowledge in financial advice, and then go back to it as a retirement plan. And I think you've had Catherine Hunt on the show before, but she was one of my lecturers when I was doing my master's at Griffith University. And because I did the master's online when I was in Tasmania, I never actually got to meet her face to face. I didn't get to meet anyone face to face. So when I first moved up to the Gold Coast, I just sent her an email. I said, "Hey, I've moved up here. I actually don't know anyone. I'd love to catch up for a coffee." And after the end of after the end of that conversation, she said, "Hey, I'm going on leave next month. Would you like to teach one of my courses?" I thought, okay, awesome. So it went from, I guess, a casual sort of contract role to then a full-time offering with the university. So now I'm continuing, and it's great. Yeah,
we're definitely a big fan of Dr. Catherine Hunt.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting journey. I want to talk about the research in a minute, but before we do, I want to talk about something that you started up a while ago. In the spirit of sort of, creating some content around helping people learn something, but become financial literate, but also in the context of it's helpful for business. Tell us about iWomen.
Awesome. So the iWomen project was actually something that I was a co-founder of with one of my friends, Sky Hawkins. So we started that project, it was my first year advising, so I guess 2013. as a way of me, one, increasing financial literacy, because it was a free event, and it was all about financial capability. So giving women in particular the skills and the knowledge about how to actually make better financial decisions. We also covered off on topics like economic abuse or financial abuse, which was really, really beneficial. So we actually got...
which was quite new back then, I guess, that conversation. It's sort of more prevalent now.
Yeah. So we got Rosie Batty on board for one of our events as well, and she came in and spoke to everyone about that, which was it was really powerful. But yeah, so the project itself was actually really, really useful for women in particular, but also from a business point of view, it actually helped us generate a lot of leads, which of course, everything, there's no such thing as a free lunch is what people say. Yeah. So yeah, I was actually able to convert a lot of those attendees that obviously requested advice into clients, which was really useful for me.
Yeah, lovely. Now, obviously, you've had that event management background, so you're able to easily run an event. Tell us about running. I mean, obviously, we can all start doing events soon, hopefully. Tell us about that idea of creating an event and then putting it on and the amount of work that goes into that.
Yeah, well, it's like when you plan a wedding. For those people listening that have helped plan a wedding, right? So much goes into it, and once the day's there, you just think, wow, this has gone really quickly, but it's been a great day. Similar sort of thing when you are planning an event. I was lucky enough to have, because I've got the university connections as well. I was lucky enough to get some universities on board to help sponsor the event. So we were getting things like free catering, free event venues and things like that. AMP actually came on board as well for one of them too. I think that was the first one that we ran.
Now they were your licensee?
Oh, second one, yes.
Yep.
Licensee. So we were able to have, a lot of things sponsored, which was excellent. It was actually funny. The ones that we ran at the university had better conversion rates from a business point of view than the one that we held at AMP, because people were thinking, oh, maybe this is linked back to them. And I just thought that was quite interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? The preconceived ideas around branding.
Yeah.
And even just having it at a university gives it a bit more of a status or a stature.
Yeah, and that's what I thought, because I'm a big believer in education. As you know, I'm a big believer in adult education. And for me, I specifically chose universities to be the sponsors for those events, because I wanted people to actually get engaged with academia, because a lot of people just think we're all dinosaurs, right?
Yeah. And universities have great facilities.
Yeah. Yep. And they're often more than, like, if you're thinking about running an event, or anyone that's listening is thinking about organising a financial event like this, reach out to your local university, because they'll be more than happy to help out, and they've got the budget for it as well.
Yep. And when you say sponsorship, they basically provided the venue and the catering.
Yeah. So all I had to do was essentially look after the accommodation for the speakers, as well as organise a photographer, which I was also lucky enough to get. They basically did it for free, which is great. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so, and of course, getting numbers.
Yes, getting numbers. Yep.
Tell us about that, the speakers. How did you find them, source them, put them in place, and what do they talk about?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think about who we've had. Oh, we had a powerhouse. I don't know if you've heard of Kirsty Dunphy before. She's incredible. She is a real, oh goodness. When she was 25, she built herself up a massive property portfolio. So she was a multi-million-dollar property owner by 25. She was amazing. Then she started her own mortgage broking company recently as well. So yeah, I just think she's a powerhouse, and she's awesome. But she was one of the speakers that we had. We also had, oh goodness, now I've forgotten her name. That's terrible.
So on the speakers, did you speak as well?
I did, but on the technical stuff. So I spoke about, the importance of insurance and superannuation and all that kind of stuff, and debt reduction. But I wasn't the main event. So it wasn't the Whitley show.
You don't need to be the main event. You just need to be somebody who's bringing it all together.
That's it.
And seem to be bringing it all together. How long was that event? How long did it go for?
It was a whole day event.
Whole day?
Yeah. So I think 10 till 4 we ran them.
And where did you find the consumers?
Because it was a free event, we're able to get a lot of publicity on news and radio, which was great. So we actually just got a lot of people through that, and they were registering.
So created a media release.
Yeah.
Sent it to the media.
Yeah.
And was willing to talk about it and promote it.
Yeah. And ABC Radio was really good as well. I think it had a few spots on there.
Yeah, brilliant. And what size? How many people?
I think the first event was actually the biggest one. I think there were 250 people at that event. Second one was smaller, I think with about 180, and then the third was even smaller again because we tried by that point to see if we could charge people.
Yeah.
So we tried a small $49 fee because we just thought, we want to get people that are going to be investing in themselves. And that one there, I think we had 65 people, and that was at RMIT.
But probably great.
Yeah.
Great leads. Now, just on that, had you spoken had a public speaking address for 250 people before?
Not at that point, no. So I learned a lot about how to present myself and how not to speak really quickly when I was nervous. And that came through with the feedback as well, like in the feedback surveys, as people's like, the content was great, but she needs to slow down. And it was really funny because it was actually those events that made me realize that I did have a massive passion for educating people. So that's when I started, I guess, pursuing the career in academia. So
you find something in those events where you go, I really enjoyed that. People listened to me and they got something out of what I had to say.
Yeah. It was more so the fact that, I could actually, especially from the leads that we did take on, is, these people wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for this event.
Yep. And
just seeing their situations from when they first came to see me to sort of where they are now in particular, it just brings me so much joy.
And what was the success off the back of those events?
Oh, goodness. This sounds so lame, but life change, I guess. Actually giving people the opportunity to reflect on the situation and to say, it's not as dire as I think it is. Or I've even had someone who didn't come on board as a client and they said to me a few years after the event, they said, I'm so thankful I came because I took out a binding financial agreement like you guys were talking about, and that helped me a lot through my separation. I was like, awesome, that's great. So it's helping, I guess, I'm not just saying for women in particular, but like people in general, like some people just aren't aware of things that are actually going to be really useful for them, for their situation. And, I'm a big advocate on binding financial agreements. I can talk to you about those another time if you like. But, giving people the tools and the resources to actually start thinking about, how can I do things myself, as well as obviously seeking advice. Like that was the thing, is like do it yourself and then seek advice. Yeah,
it's really interesting then that, and if we do the inverted commas bunny, is it either the general information, general advice type framework, running those large events where you can actually get to a lot of people. And obviously with online now, we can get to masses of consumers or humans that are not necessarily looking to get financial advice now, but could really do with some information. Yeah,
definitely.
And probably so much information that where they understand what it is, and rather than going maybe and trying to research and read through marketing material, to get some straight shooting information about what they can do and how they can do it. Put those sort of things in place. Take us back to your university scenario. I mentioned we come back to this. Some of the research you're doing. What led you down this path? Well, first of all, let's talk about what it is. You can explain it, and then I want to know what led you down that path.
Yeah. So my research at the moment, it's still in its infancy. So I'm looking. I'm doing an honours project as a pathway to my PhD, which, like I said, should be completed. Well, honours will be completed next year, early next year. But I'm looking at how your mindset influences your financial well-being. And for me, mindset's always been something that I have liked to investigate a little bit more because I just find people really fascinating. And I guess the reason I chose that topic is because when I was dealing with a lot of clients, some people had really, really negative outlooks on the way in which they viewed their situation or just their life in general. And sometimes there was connections between that and their net wealth, and other times there weren't. So I give you some examples. So I had this one gentleman who came into the office, and he was in his late 40s, and he actually had a lot of money, like a substantial amount of wealth, but it was all just invested in term deposits. And he just said to me, I'm just really bad with managing money. I'm thinking, no, you're not. You've got like $500,000 sitting in cash in your bank account. Like, you're not bad with your money. So why are you thinking that you're bad with your money? And then they've got the other side of things, right? Where you think people think that they're awesome at managing their money and they've got like $70,000 of unsecured debt. And I just think it's overconfidence, right? In that instance, overconfidence. But, looking at the two discrepancies with that and just trying to think, why do people think like that?
Yep. Yep.
And figuring out if there is a link between that and obviously optimism, right? And seeing how that plays into effect. But there's so many factors.
There are so many factors. And when I think about mindset, it blows my mind. That wasn't a joke. But they share the different areas. I like to talk about the idea of, your emotional, the ball of emotions that we are as humans, versus the logical thinking part of our brain is one part. But let's go back down to some of the other areas that you're looking at. You're looking at optimism versus pessimism. What sort of a personality trait are you? Which leads into then mindset and thinking. What are the other areas?
Yeah, so I guess the main, I'm piggybacking off Professor Carol Dweck. So she did a lot of research back in the day into fixed and growth mindsets. But back when she first started, it was actually looking at incremental or fixed ways in which they viewed the world or viewed intelligence. So, people with a fixed mindset, for example, see that failures are reflective of you as a person. And, so I'm bad with money, therefore I'm a bad person, or I failed at something, therefore I'm not very smart. Whereas people with a growth mindset, for example, see those failures as opportunities to learn and to make improvements to better themselves and better the outcome.
Yeah. So emotional flexibility.
Yeah.
Behavioral flexibility, all those sort of things to be able to say, well, to reflect back on what you've done and say that was actually a positive learning rather than a negative beat myself up.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to money, a lot of people are in that, money's evil type thing. How can the mindset of past generations affect?
Oh, I love that question. Oh goodness, it definitely plays a huge factor actually, especially, and we all saw this with the GFC, right, as well, when people say, "Oh, I'm not going to invest heavily into shares because my parents lost a lot of money in the GFC." You've got to, and this is why I think, I'm going to talk about what I want to happen with my research. But one of the main reasons I'm looking into this is because I think this is a huge area that's lacking in financial planning, and I think that I would love to see questions about mindset and the way in which clients actually view themselves and the surroundings integrated into the fact finding and advice process as well, because I think that it'll help the clients actually have a bit of agency, right? So it'll motivate them and encourage them to actually get more invested in the actual financial planning process, as opposed to perhaps the older style of giving advice, which was, I'm your advisor. You don't have to necessarily understand what I'm doing, but I'm going to do what's in your best interest. I shouldn't say it like that, but do you know what I mean? Like the old school advice, definitely not the advice that's being given now in 2021.
But I feel like the failure of a financial plan is the inability then of that person, the consumer, to take on the behaviours required.
Yeah.
So behavioural, the idea of the fact find being, yes, you can get their data around what they spent and their habits of spending and spending more than they earn or earning more than they spend or whatever that might be. But the idea around those past behavioural issues that have caused them to be in the situation now and to be able to solve that from down the track.
Well, behavioural economics is I think it's fascinating.
Yep.
And, Richard Thaler, I don't know if you've read any of his stuff. He's got a really good book called Nudge. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend reading it.
I haven't heard of Nudge,
but he basically says that you can encourage people to do things, right, by giving them a little nudge. And I'm not going to go into that into too much detail, but that's what I'd like to see in financial advice, right? It's like prodding people in the right direction and making them think it's their idea.
Yeah, I'd love to also have that sort of nudge around the some guide rails or guard rails around their spending or their habits. It'd be great to have a little text message to say, hey, remember that thing you wanted? It's, you just turned it off track. Do you want to turn it back? So it's a nice thing. What about so a lot of that's around spending, but what about other behaviours and habits and mindsets? How do you nudge in that?
I think, oh goodness, I haven't thought about that too much yet, because I'm still, like I said, it's still in my infancy. But I think when it comes to other areas, it's actually encouraging people to think that financial freedom, God, that's such an overused term, but financial freedom is possible. But obviously that's going to be different from person to person. And what I like, I don't know if you've heard of Dave Ramsey. He's like this he's this American finance guy.
Yep. Bit of hype.
Yeah.
But also straight shooting.
Yeah. Oh, what I like about him is that in his first, I think in one of his books, he says at the very beginning, your current financial situation is actually on you. Where you are currently is based on the decisions that you've made in the past.
Yep.
Let's just accept where we are now and let's go forward.
Take ownership. Yep.
And I just think that's awesome because we do need to take ownership over our own situation, whether that's, personal stuff, financial things, whatever. And I guess it's sort of following on from that, living above the line concept of, life happens through me, not to me. So not taking on that victim mentality and going, progressing
Yeah,
through.
so regret's a great one for that. But the victim mentality you mentioned is really interesting because that means that you have to basically say that, I can't blame anybody else for anything. I can't be angry with anybody. I can't be jealous of anybody.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't do that without being the victim.
Yeah.
So if I don't want to be the victim, I have to then change that concept and just basically forgive and be happy for everybody else.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But I love it. It's great. And like I said, I'm really excited about how this research is going to influence, the financial planning process.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And just on that, I want to touch on towards and away from styles of motivation.
Yep.
How do you see that overlaying?
Oh, how to actually motivate people.
Yep.
Oh, I guess for me, it does depend on such a financial advisor thing to say. It depends on the circumstance and the client, right? It depends on the
What's the answer? The answer is always it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to best educate somebody, because, the carrot and stick method might work with somebody, but it might not work with the next person that comes through the door. So it's figuring out, one, how do they learn in the first place? But again, I think the mindset's going to make a huge difference on that, because if you've got somebody that is quite optimistic, and you can have somebody that actually is quite optimistic that has a fixed mindset, right? Because they may have tried and tried and tried, but they've failed and failed and failed, and they've gotten to that point where they just think, oh, I've just given up. I suck.
Yeah.
And it's not the case at all.
Yeah.
Whereas, so for somebody like that, creating new opportunities to actually change their mindset and intercept them on that, I think will make a huge difference.
Yeah. So this is where I see the advisors of the future having a really high emotional intelligence when it comes to the psychology, and being able to understand and listen to the words that are being said from the client, and to be able to then stop and instead of just jumping to the answer, stopping and listening to the words and saying, you said that thing. What if you said this thing instead, or changed it around? Yeah. Yeah. So there's a fair bit we can add to the FASEA training.
There is. But I feel like we're just starting out on that journey. So let's maybe continue as it is for now, and then add to it later.
Yeah. Ease off. Fantastic. So, is there anything else around that research you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
I think for me, like I'm looking at the moment, for the honest, I'm drawing comparisons between, an Australian sample and a US sample, and I think that's going to be quite powerful. The actual PhD, though, is going to go into a little bit more detail and include other areas like mental health as well, and see how that makes a difference, and physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking that, and when you said that, I was trying on the spectrum of mental health and physical health, and then going, well, it's funny because mental health can vary on that spectrum from high to low at any moment of the day. So that would then create a timing issue for advice as well.
Yeah. So oh goodness, it's going to be a really exciting journey, I think, when I get to that point. But the reason I want to look at that is because there is this thing called the mind-body connection, right? And we see this a lot in sports science and in health, where, people can essentially, we all know what stress does to the body as well, right? So if you're really, really stressed, it's obviously going to have negative impacts on your physical health.
Is it cortisol?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it affects the cortisol. But also there have been studies where people have basically either thought that they were cursed. For example, there's one study where this woman thought she was cursed, and she was completely healthy, but her body absolutely deteriorated. Other research has been done where I remember this one person had a stomach ulcer that was bleeding, again, given a placebo pill, some treatment, obviously not actual treatment, placebo treatment. And it stopped bleeding. She healed, things like that. Tumors reducing based on psychology. And I just think, wow, if that can happen in the body based on how you think, what kind of an impact is that going to have on your money if you think differently? And it's not just a case of obviously just thinking. There are other factors involved as well about, financial capabilities and actually empowering yourself. But I think it's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. So financial security is love to see the numbers, but that turns it into financial happiness.
Yeah.
That turns your mind into a happy place. I'm happy about how much I'm earning. I'm happy about my future, my security. Therefore, I'm going to be healthy and live longer.
Yeah.
Is there any stats around that? People that live longer because they're financially secure?
Oh, I haven't seen that yet, but I'll definitely be looking into that.
Got to be some research
I reckon there is. But it's quite interesting that you talked about longevity and things like that and happiness because. And this is, again, I'm not quoting research on this is just my experience. But, going to other countries where people are actually a lot poorer, they've got a greater sense of community in general. Like generally their happiness and well-being is a lot higher than people perhaps in Australia that are earning a lot more and don't have that sense of community. And they're, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been some, I don't know, I can't quote them, but I remember talking to somebody about this around the idea of happiness and just saying people that don't have a lot of choices as well, or a lot of media, a lot of TV sets, a lot of news feeds are actually quite happy.
Yeah.
Can be. Very good. Now, tell me about this research and since you started it, how has that affected or changed the conversations that you're having with your clients?
Oh, it has a lot. And it's actually made me a lot more picky with who I actually take on as clients.
Ah, interesting.
Because I've sort of gotten to the stage in my career now, well, I actually don't want to work with someone unless they're actually invested in themselves. So it's not just a case of, they like me as an advisor. It's, do I think that you've got the capacity to actually change your situation? Are you invested in that process?
So what do you say to them? How do you go through that process? Like what's the criteria that you set?
It's a polite vetting conversation. Yeah. It's not, I don't cut them off. There's been a few people where I've said, look, maybe you're better suited to another advisor in the practice or another advisor at another practice.
But you just ask a lot of questions and then internally through your own values what
that's it.
That means.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's good to be in that position, isn't it, where you don't have to take on the work?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how does that work with your employer and boss and those sorts of things?
It's fine. Yeah. It's fine because I'm basically at capacity at the moment now anyway. So I've been at the point probably for the last 18 months where I'm not taking on any new clients unless they're coming through the lending side of the business.
Yep.
Because, with my role at the university, that's my full-time role and I'm doing advising and, brokering part-time.
Yep.
So I'm pretty busy as it stands. I'm pretty busy as it is. But, so, in order for me to actually service the clients that I've got and do a good job, it's just, I've met my limit for advice clients at this point.
So for you, it's about less clients, but a much deeper relationship with those clients, looking after everything.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep. And tell us about the university stuff in the future. You want to do your PhD?
Yes. Yeah.
And then continue to do both? Or?
Oh, yeah, continue to do both. Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think I mentioned earlier on, it depends on what's happening with my family's business, right? And as to whether or not they would like me to buy them out at that point.
Yep.
I don't know is the answer. I'm not going to get into licensee.
It depends is the answer. Remember?
Depends. Yes, depends is the answer.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely I think it's really important for me to do both roles because I'm actually, since I've been working at Griffith, I've actually become a better advisor. I'm more up to date with all of the requirements of the legislation, how to actually implement things, which has been useful for our practice because I've been able to look at the processes that we have and say, hey, why don't we look at doing it this way?
Yep.
But it's also meant that I'm a better teacher as well, or a better lecturer, because my students are able to learn from somebody who's actually a practitioner. And for me, when I was doing my studies, particularly in my undergraduate degree, I just remember getting really frustrated thinking, you've never worked in the industry. How the hell can you teach me anything? And I shouldn't say it like that, but that was my thoughts.
Yep.
And, that
was your mindset.
Yeah. Just recently, I just finished teaching a 6-week course of postgraduate students. And one of them said to me, Whitley, I've been advising for 30 years. And when I first came into this course, I thought to myself, why the hell do I have to do this? Because it was called Case Studies in Financial Planning, right? So all the advisors who are coming in are thinking, I do this every day. But the difference was at the end of that 6-week course, every single one of the advisors said, thank you, I learned so much.
Yep.
And it wasn't a case of just learning from me. It was about learning from each other. And I guess that's one of the, not to push university, but that's one of the biggest things about higher education is actually does get you to start thinking about the world differently. And I have a big focus on collaboration as well because, you know, when you've got, even if it's a small class of 10 people, for example, if they're all existing advisors, you've got so much experience in there and, you know, they'll have more experience than me.
Yeah.
So it's really important that they learn from each other as well as from me because I don't know everything.
Yeah, I think it's just about introducing those AQF levels of how deep you want to go into the conversation and how, you know, like we can all see examples. That's probably the easy part, but it's how do you then think critically and look at other points of view and trying to take your own point of view and say, that was my point of view, but what if it wasn't? You know, like those sorts of critical thinking type things. Amazing. Talk to me about, you're obviously seeing a lot of people coming through the university. We're talking about professional year type people, but also people that are bringing their education levels up. How do you see this, you know, with regards to, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't going to become an advisor straight away, and then there's some that already are.
Yeah.
What do you see with the future of all these new people coming through that aren't yet advising?
That's right. I'm actually really optimistic about, you know, where financial advice is going to be in the next 10 years. The caliber of students that I'm getting through for financial advice, they're excellent. Particularly the postgrad students that are coming through, right? And I know a lot of them are existing advisors, right? But they are wanting to learn and to upskill, which I think is really, really beneficial. The undergraduates, I feel they're great. I just feel like they don't know what they're in for yet with respect to the amount of compliance and paperwork that comes along with financial advice. And I try and, you know, at the end of my course, because I teach the capstone undergraduate course, I try and make it a bit more realistic. I say, look, you're in a position where you are actually going to help people and you're going to make a huge difference in their lives, but just bear in mind that does come with a lot of compliance and a lot of regulation, a lot of paperwork. So you just brace yourself for that. And the first few years of your career, you're going to have to slog it a little bit. I do talk about work-life balance as well, about, you know, don't let your employers flog you to the point that you can't get up on on a Monday.
Yeah, that you lose your motivation to turn up. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's it's really interesting. So I've had a few students that have graduated and have secured roles and they're doing their professional year. And, you know, one of them, I think he's 26 and he just works all the time, like 12-hour days, you know, he'll work on the weekends and he's exhausted. And I just think, but he's doing that because he wants to put in all the effort for his employer so he'd move up the ranks. But I'm just like, it's not worth it.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. Like I put my foot down probably maybe 3 years ago and I just said, I'm no longer going to work on the weekends.
Yep. Because
you can be just as productive if you use your time wisely, you know, Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday or whatever it is. I find I'm more productive now in the time that I spend in the office than I was when I was working on the weekends.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Now, a few years ago, we were all worried about the robo advice coming in and taking on the roles. Do you think that the education standards lifting, the work you're doing in mindset and psychology adds so much more complexity to the advisor role compared to an algorithm?
Yeah, look, I think there is a place for robo advice, in my opinion, for very simple things, right? Very, very, very simple things. You're never going to replace face-to-face advice, or at least, you know, person-to-person advice. But yeah, there are so many different layers of complexity with giving advice, both now and where I see financial advice in the future. And I think, you know, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big believer in not necessarily coaching per se, but I feel like the coaching element should actually be integrated in the financial advice process, or at least the way in which advisors in Australia give advice.
Yep. Risk profiling is obviously a passion of yours.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you think that should be evolved to and obviously how quickly it should have been evolved to.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think it should. At the moment, I'm sort of limited to what my licensee requires, so I'm not going to go into too much detail for that. But it's funny how the licensee standard is created, and it's like, it's about know your client, and then what you see from your academic studies is that this is a whole... It's a lot more complicated than a 12-answer short survey.
Yes.
I don't know how else to word that eloquently.
Yes, I'm hoping technology can play a big part in that and allow advisors to be able to really profile and model and understand, if they can't instantly spot it, what that might mean for consumers and
That's
how they can help them.
Yeah.
Wonderful. What does the future hold for you at the moment?
Oh, goodness. I'm taking one day at a time at the moment, to be honest. So finishing my research project is number one priority for the next sort of 6 to 12 months, then enrolling in the PhD.
How long does the PhD take?
Well, in theory, I want to get it done in 2.5 years if I can, because the honours is forming part of the PhD.
Yep.
But let's say in the next 3 years, I will be finished with my studies for now.
Yep.
So we talked about iWoman project a while earlier on, and for me, the future holds another program similar to that. I've actually had the business name registered for about 5 years now, and I haven't done anything with it, but it's called Mind Body Wallet.
Okay.
And it's basically going to be an online education platform to encourage people to, I guess, upskill in their financial knowledge and capabilities. So financial education, but also, again, linking back in the mindset things with that as well. So helping them shift from, fixed mindset to a growth mindset, as well as building up their practical skills. But the overall objective for that is to actually get people to seek advice at the end of it.
Yep.
So it's not just, hey, this is going to be a 12-week program that's going to replace the need for advice. It's actually going to be like, hey, in these 12 weeks, you're going to learn so much about your situation. You can see vast improvement from day 1 till the end of week 12. And at the end of week 12, when you figured out, all of your cash flow and budgeting, things like that, and you've built up a cash buffer, go and seek advice from a qualified professional who's actually going to help you invest that and make that $10,000 or whatever it is a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. And this is for the, if I think of the bell curve, the people in the middle of the bell curve and heading towards that advice end and trying to push more than just the 10% into
That's
advice,
it.
which the stats show happens in every industry. There's 10% of any industry ends up with prestige end.
And that's it. And that's sort of like my practice in Tasmania. We actually deal with, I say quote unquote, mums and dads, right? We deal with the mums and dads, obviously, and being in regional Tasmania, that's our target market. Yep. But I love those types of clients because I can really, like, from when they first see me to where they are sort of now, like, they've had huge improvements. I've had so many people pay off their home loans, which has been it's such an exciting thing to help somebody become debt free.
Yep.
Especially, I think I shouldn't say she's my biggest success story, but I have quite a few young people who came to me fresh out of university. So they had, just started their new, the first role, they wanted to open up a superannuation account. And, these people are now, one of them from 20 to 25, we paid off her home loan, right, which is awesome. She's now 27 and I'm helping her buy another investment property and it's only got an LVR of 50%, right? Anyway, I'm not going to, I just get so happy when I see young people making really good decisions. And, there's quite a few of, especially the young ones, where they are, if you get onto it early and you help shape their behavior from the beginning, when they start managing the money, these people, their trajectory is going to be more than they'd ever imagined.
Yep. And the real key to this is advice affordability, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Any ideas on how we do that?
I don't know if anyone from ASIC is listening. No, but we should totally reduce some of the red tape. Not all of it, because it's there for a reason and it's really, really important. But it pains me how much work goes into a single statement of advice. And if you're dealing with somebody in their early 20s, right, and you've got to charge them $5,000 or $6,000, it's just so unaffordable. And I don't know.
Well, it's taken them all that time to save the first $10,000 and they want to invest it, and you say, great, there's $5,500 in the SOA.
That's it. So I think, looking at affordable advice, it's, oh goodness, it's something that I know one of my colleagues is looking into from a research point of view, but there's so much work that needs to be done in that space. But when you've got so much compliance that comes along with it, it's really hard because you want to help these people, but you're also not a charity and you need to have a profitable business in order to keep the doors open. Yep. So there's a fine line, and I don't have a solution. I would love to have a solution because then I'd be sharing it with everybody.
The answer is depends. Well, Lee, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. If somebody want to continue the conversation, what's the best way they can get hold of you?
Google me. No, but honestly, just have a look, I'd say, on the Griffith website, or just shooting me through an email.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.